Hi, I'm Adam. Welcome to my den. I got a chance to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League a few days ago at a friend's house, really good projection room, so I got a good view of it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about it, not just about the movie, but about other things surrounding the movie and the way these things can impact our everyday lives and our society. Let's start with a 4-hour runtime. So these are just the only two spoilers that I'm going to make, these first 2 points. One of them is the 4-hour runtime, and the other is going to be about the format of the movie. About the runtime, 4 hours sounds quite long, but as I watched the movie, I truly didn't feel like I was being fed stuff that shouldn't be in the movie. It all felt justified and not at all slow. So 4 hours doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a slow movie, and Zack Snyder's Justice League kind of proves that point. So it's not slow, and it actually reminded me of an older style of filmmaking, not constrained by a ruling form with the same rhythmic beats. It felt like it flowed naturally, which says a lot about the storytelling of the movie. It felt fluid. It didn't feel forced or slow-paced for no purpose at all. It felt like everything fits. Secondly, let's talk about the format of the movie. This movie was shown in a 4:3 format. For those who don't know, I imagine everybody knows about these details these days, but just in case. Most movies that you watch these days, and including, for example, this video that if you're watching on YouTube or any other video platform that I use, check out the links below, you're watching in the 16:9 format. Zack Snyder's Justice League is shown in a 4:3 format, which used to be the format of old-style televisions. Now, let's talk about the character development and music and story arcs and all that. This is a great lesson on how to flesh out each character's individual strengths. So you know by now that this is kind of Zack Snyder's comeback to the project after a personal tragedy in his life that, well, caused him to leave the project and hand it over to Joss Whedon. Now, Joss Whedon's version, in my opinion, is god-awful. It's just, it's so bad, it's kind of an insult, not just to comic fans, which I also am, but also for any movie lover out there. Nothing really meshed together. It just felt like everything was being put on the table and it felt forced, like a checklist. Here's this hero, here's what they can do, here's this plot point, here's what it means, and it all felt forced and expectable. You didn't even need any foreshadowing in that movie. You can just tell how the movie's gonna go from the moment you start watching it. In this case, if you haven't watched the Joss Whedon version of Justice League, then you'll be happily surprised either way, if you have watched it or not. But if you haven't watched it, you're probably not gonna know everything about the movie from the moment you start watching it. There are a lot of little moments that are going to surprise you. At least they did me, and I already knew the product because I watched the other one once. I tried watching a second time and I just stopped. That's it. I think this is a good moment where I should note that I am not necessarily a fan of Zack Snyder. I'm a big fan of his 300 movie, and his take on Watchmen was amazing in my view. And if you're going to watch Watchmen, please watch the Ultimate Cut. Once you watch the Ultimate Cut, you're going to know that every other cut is quite meaningless, especially if you know the source material. Which brings me back to the runtime. Maybe this is where Zack Snyder finds his stride. Watchmen, the Ultimate Cut, is 3.5 hours long. So maybe this is how Zack Snyder can really show his strength as a director, adapting a very dense comic book source material into a movie. So going back to character development, you actually feel like every single character has their own motivation and goal. And this says a lot about the story arcs, which were much more developed in this version than in the previous version. Remember, DC decided to not do individual movies for each character. So the audience, especially if you don't know the characters from the comics, or if you're not familiar with them from other movies, it might be hard for audience members to feel empathy toward these characters, not knowing their personal motivations, generally speaking, not just because of this, not just the motivations present in this movie. By developing these story arcs the way he did in this version, Zack Snyder was able to build sort of a bridge of empathy with the audience, whereby each character, like I said, has a very clear goal and motivation, and the audience is in the moment with them. Now, this is not to say that the movie is without flaw. I mean, the movie, in my opinion, has a lot of faults, and it trips over itself in many ways, but it is a huge step up from the original. From the first one, I hate to call it the original, but it's what it was. I mean, it was the first release of this movie. So the first release is god-awful bad. It's a waste of time and resources, whereas this one, even though it uses a lot more time and resources, it builds up a very good story that's like a mesh of various individual stories, including the villain's story. So, from someone who's not necessarily a Zack Snyder fan, kudos to Zack Snyder for this effort. He is owed some serious applause for what he did. Now, let's talk about one of the key aspects of most of Zack Snyder's movies, which is the music. This is not, the first point I want to make is not just a Zack Snyder thing. It's prevalent in, I would say, any movie that comes out these days, which is the original soundtrack. Remember when movie soundtracks, original film scores, actually told a story by itself? If you pick up, for example, Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings trilogy soundtrack, especially Two Towers, which is my favorite soundtrack of all, you can almost feel the movie as you listen to it. You can feel the beats, you can feel the tensions of the plot in that music. But you cannot say that about most of the film scores that come out these days. And overall, they're just background noise, and this is no exception. You do have moments where you hear each individual heroic themes, like you hear Wonder Woman's themes and you hear Man of Steel's themes, which again, I'm really not at all a fan of Man of Steel. Zack Snyder, I mean, talk about butchering a character, and that was just a waste of a movie, in my opinion. And I hated everything, all that first moment in Krypton. I hated it from beginning to end. I understand what people say about Henry Cavill as Superman. I get what they say, that people love him as Superman. I have to say that Zack Snyder's version of Justice League, this 4-hour movie, was actually the first time I could actually see Henry Cavill as Superman, and boy, did he do a great job. Better than Man of Steel, which again I thoroughly dislike that movie. But in this one, I do see how Henry Cavill could be a very good Superman and Clark Kent, but mostly Superman. I don't really like his take on Clark Kent. I think he needs to flesh it out a little better, but great job on this one. Now, the songs. Zack Snyder is also very famous for using songs in his movies, and I think this is a dismissible trait of his most of his movies. Like, for example, I talk about Watchmen. I don't think that Watchmen needed so many reminders that we're in the 80s. I don't think that it needed so many songs to get the audience to feel some sort of mojo of that specific decade or decades. I think it probably helps to have a couple, but I think Zack Snyder is famous for going overboard with these songs. And again, this is not an exception to that rule. Now, we haven't talked about the controversy of this movie. I don't really understand why there's any controversy at all. The fans wanted a better version of this story, and they got it. That's it. And they got, I think it's unanimous from what I hear. I think it's unanimous that this was a really good movie. Not that the majority is always right, but in this case, I tend to agree. I think this is a very, very good effort that was put into telling these stories, individual stories, which then combine into this overarching main plot, if you want to call it that. So I don't understand all this controversy. I don't get it. I don't want to get into it really, because I think it's just a waste of time. This is a really good movie, in my opinion. period. It does have, like I said, places where it trips over itself, but it's a matter mostly of style, which is the reason why I don't consider myself a Zack Snyder fan, even though I like some of his movies. I think it's more a matter of style than actual telling of the story. So as a director, he did a really good job with the material that he had, in my opinion. Now let's get on to something that is closer to home for me, something that I think this movie is a good segue into. Picking up on the controversy of this movie, and not just of this movie, but the controversy surrounding most of the choices that studios are making these days regarding comic book characters. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I don't think it's just people who have a lot of time in their hands and they miss a cause to rally on. I think that people feel so strongly about these choices because, in a way, they are our new mythologies. This is not a new theory or a new school of thought. A lot of people have talked about this before, but I found myself questioning if groups of people, regardless of their status in society, would be so willing to change old mythologies as they are these new mythologies. There are, because of the medium they were born in, they were born out of comic books, which is an artistic medium, instead of a religious one, which is what I would call the old mythologies, like the Norse mythology, Greek mythology, and even Christian mythologies, or any religious mythologies, really. I mean, they were born out of a place of faith, even though there is the use of imagination on both. Maybe people feel at liberty to change these artistically originated mythologies more than the religious ones. However, their place in our lives, in our society's evolution, I would argue that can be comparable. So this is where I would like to reach out and ask for your opinion, because what I'm telling you is just stuff that I've been I think about when I'm in the shower, when I'm walking around, when I'm going about my everyday life, and I found myself wondering about this the liberties that we take when we change the mythologies. How far do we go with them, and how willing are we to change these things that are so impactful in our society? And if you think they aren't, I mean, what other models outside of the religious models, what other models do you have that influence the way you act in your daily life? Of course, you have family. That's the social structure that influences your choices. Yes. Then you have your various societal structures, like when you go to school. That's another societal structure that will influence the way you look at things and the way you choose to go about things in the world and in your everyday and life obstacles. Sure, I mean, your place of work will influence you. The co-workers that you're surrounded by, they will influence you in some way. So you have a lot of social groups that you're part of that will influence your behavior and your choices and your overall attitude towards life. Sure, but then above those are these ideals that are portrayed by our older mythologies and our new mythologies. So Superman is the ideal of someone who is absolutely righteous and incorruptible. Batman, on the other hand, is the same, but these two occupy different spectrums of points of view, even though they act based on similarly strong principles, and these principles speak to their values. And so these are probably two of the most iconic heroes, and not for good, not without reason. They speak to the better part of ourselves and to the darkest part of ourselves, but both are grounded in both are principled men, principled human beings rather, and just like Wonder Woman, who I would say, in my knowledge of the character, which isn't that extensive, so please feel free to shed some light on the character down in the comments below. But I think from what I know about the character and the way she fluctuates in her relationship with the world of men, she can either be motivated by a very bright view of the world or a very dark view of the world. So I would say that this triangle of the most powerful DC heroes do reflect a large portion of society. So even though they came to be via an artistic medium, do they not occupy the same place as our former models of the ideal human being, one that is incorruptible, one that will prevail in the face of unsurmountable challenges. And then we go back to that question: how much do we change about their origins and about their struggles and about the way that they look upon the world? Because these things are all interconnected. If you change a character's origin, you are naturally changing the way they develop as a person, develop their character, and the way they look at the world. So how much artistic freedom are we, in air quotes, allowed to have with these characters' origin stories? And so I think that's where the controversy comes from. Well, I'm talking about the controversy that today surrounds these choices that we make about our modern mythologies. How far are we willing to go? And why not? And this is another question that I'm echoing from other people who appreciate the same literature that I do. But why not create new heroes and villains if you want to tell a different story? Societies evolve. That's what we're talking about here. Naturally, within that evolution, we're going to have new needs that we didn't have before because we hadn't evolved to this stage yet. So now maybe we need more heroes than just the ones that are personified by this, for example, this triangle that we talked about: Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. That's why we have Marvel. It's a different way of telling heroic stories, maybe a more fantastical way. Maybe I don't know. That's arguable. So instead of changing origin stories of the characters that we hold so dear and that have risen to the status of being the models of human idealism, why not create new characters that embody the new complexities of the society that we evolved into? I guess that's my point. And because of this, because of my deep interest in mythologies and how they influence our everyday lives and our societies in general, I would love to have a conversation with someone who maybe is an audience member, or someone who has dedicated their professional lives, or as a hobby they dedicated themselves to researching the topic. If you have a name that comes to mind, throw it my way in the comments below, or shoot me a message on my website. All the links will be below. So what are your thoughts on the Snyder Cut? Whether you've actually watched the first one or not, I would love to hear both sides of this equation. And how do you think mythologies impact your personal life and the lives of the people around you? Can we be the heroes of our own story? And if so, what motivates us? What are our goals? Very interesting topics here. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I hope you enjoyed this edition of Home Cinema. Check back in for new videos. Remember to subscribe, like, share, all that stuff, and check out the Adam's Den website. I just released it not that long ago, and I would love to get your input. So till next time, stay cool, stay safe, stay classy, and I'll see you then.